Hey everyone, please support what I do to help keep Greyhawk alive by subscribing to the channel. Also, please consider becoming a channel member to get early access to videos, exclusive live chats, quarterly adventure modules, and more. Thanks, and enjoy the show. One of the things I've always loved about the world of Greyhawk is the way it uses human sub-races to add to the realism of the setting. And that's what I want to talk about today on Greyhawk Grognard. With the recent news about Wizards of the Coast changing the word race to species or something else, and now they're doing away with half races, like half elves and half orcs, I thought it'd be interesting to go back to the sources here for the world of Greyhawk and talk about the human races that exist. And a lot of people try to conflate the races in the Flanaess with real-world human races, and it really doesn't work, and I hope I can tease out why. But to go through it, there are the Baklunish, the Flannae, the Oeridians, and the Suloise. There are a couple of other ones that are not really all that well represented. There's the Tuve, who are way far to the south, but we don't really learn about them until much later in the Scarlet Brotherhood book. There are also the Rennie barge folk and the Atloi, their cousins. But those are kind of a very small, specialized thing. They don't really impact the broader picture. So we have here in the Guide to the World of Greyhawk characteristics of the races inhabiting the Flanaess. And we've got, we've got the big 1, 2, 3, 4. We've got the big four. And I just want to go through the description here, and then kind of, there are some parallels to the real world, and there are some deviations from the world, and I think it's important to really emphasize that. The Baklunish, for example. The Baklunish people have golden-hued skin tones, and they talk about the eye color. The wolf nomads are intermarried with the rovers of the barrens. They're talking about various different places in the Flanaess and where they've gone. Basically, the Baklunish are in the northwest of the Flanaess, and some of their influence has been over in the northern part of the continent. And where's that? Right there we go. And we've got this handy-dandy map that shows you where the different racial groups have migrated over the centuries. And up here, this is the Baklunish, the dotted line, the dashed line. And you can see it goes up and across, and then it rebounds off of that group of Flannae people. And given the titles of the nobles in the nation, they have sultans, they have caliphs, they have things like that. The Baklunish are supposed to be sort of the Middle Eastern people, and yet there are important differences because not only are they polytheistic, which is right there and then kind of separates them from what we consider today to be modern Middle Eastern people, because the vast majority of whom are obviously Muslim. And of course there are some Christians, and there's other groups in the modern world, but the vast majority, when you say Middle Eastern, you think Muslim. And the mere fact that the Baklunish are polytheistic kind of sets that on its side, which I think is good. This is an example of Gygax taking a real world thing and then putting a twist on it in order to make it work better in a fantasy setting. Now, if we look further on the racial and national dress, the Baklunish people are of two sorts. The northern branch favors bright patterns and gaudy colors. They wear gowns and robes, or else short breeks and flowing coats. The poorer folk even wear gaudy prints, although their garments are typically a one-piece coverall with whatever additional garb they can add. The southern branch likes party colors of a more pastel hue. Their dress is complex and full of many puffs and slashes when adorned for special events. They commonly wear rough hide and cloth when traveling or at war, and their shields and banners showing clan colors. So they're talking about the paynims there, which name comes. It's actually a Middle Ages word meaning pagan, pretty much. Non-Christian. But the big difference there, of course, is, yes, they have some cultural elements that are adopted from medieval Muslim countries, but the fact that they are in fact polytheistic gives it that twist, and I think that's an important thing to remember when you're trying to say, oh well, they're obviously a stand-in for this. No, they're inspired by it. They might even be based on it, but there are these differences that make it say you can't say that it's a one-for-one relationship, and I think that's the important thing. Okay, so next up we have the Flannae, also known as the Flan people. And if you look here, you see these areas, give me this, these areas of cross-hatching here, and there, and there. Those are where the Flan people were originally at the time of the start of the migrations from the Suel Imperium and its areas. So here we hear the Flan race have a bronze-colored complexion. This varies from a lighter, almost copper shade to a very dark tone, which is deepest brown. Eye color is commonly dark brown, blood. Okay. And because of the bronze coloration and the fact that they were in the Flanaess first, in fact, that's where the word Flanaess comes from. It's from the Flan people. The association is made between them and American Indians, Amerindians, Native Americans, whatever you want to call them. The kicker here, though, is that it doesn't really keep, because here we have hair coloration is black, brown, black, dark brown, or brown. Also, Flannae tend to have wavy or curly hair, which doesn't really sound very American Indian. People of the Duchy of Ten are pure Flan, proud of their bronze color. Joff and Sterich, despite mixture, have strong Flan racial influence. The Rovers of the Barons, yada, yada, yada. And when we get to the racial and national dress, we see the Flannae once wore brightly hued body paints, with yellow ochre and vermilion being the favorites. That sounds more Celtic to me, like Picts and things like that you would, or Britons during the Roman conquest. That seems more of an ancient Celtic thing than an Amerindian thing. While the Rovers of the Barons still use considerable body painting where their high boots, loincloth, and chest and arm armor don't cover them, the more civilized Flan dress in the mode currently fashionable in their portion of the continent. Garments, however, tend to be of more solid primary colors with very bright hues predominant. So, there again, we see that there are some parallels with American Indians, and then the whole thing is taken on its side again. We've got, a very modernized, they're very modernized. Their body painting really calls back more Celtic than Amerindian stuff. And of course we have the fact that they have curly hair, which doesn't sound very American Indian at all. So again, I think we have something where we have, there's influence and there's obviously inspiration, but it's not by any stretch a one-to-one correlation. And I like that. I really think that adds to it because it means this isn't just a pastiche of a lot of real world things. So there's variation and innovation on top of the inspiration. Next up, we have the Oeridians, and once again we see in the migration that big black. It's hard to tell on this one, but there's little dotted lines that you can see going like that, and they follow along with the dark lines. Some places they follow along with others. Those are the Oeridians, and they're the most dynamic of the different races that come into the Flanaess. The Oeridians have skin tones ranging from tan to olive. They have hair which runs the gamut of color from honey blonde to black, although brown and reddish brown are most common. Eye coloration is highly variable, although brown and gray are frequently seen in individuals. Unmixed Oeridians, despite claims of the Great Kingdom, are most common in Furiandi, Perrinland, the Shield Lands, and in the east and south in North Province, Medigia, Anwald, and Sunni. So right there we learn that the Great Kingdom is supposed to be proud of its Oeridian heritage, because it's boasting that it's the most pure-blooded when in fact it's not. So it's something that's dynamic, and I've personally identified the Oeridians usually with the Romans in the real world, but even that doesn't come in, doesn't hold true forever. Let me see here. Here we go. Oeridians typically favor checks and plaids. Oeridy and Nyrondal houses tend to wear plaids, while the southern and western Oeridians favor checks, often of a diamond pattern or similar variation from the standard square. Clothing tends to be towards light, tight-legged trousers, close-fitting upper garments, and capes or cloaks. So we don't. This is the most generic in terms of, when you think medieval European, that's a pretty close thing to what you're going to be thinking of. Early Renaissance, Italy, and so forth. And that's really where I get the Roman thing, is because it reminds me of something in like Venice in the Middle Ages, or Verona, or something like that. So I associate them with the Romans, but of course it's a real stretch, because there's nothing, if it was really meant to be a Roman analog, there would have been some mention of togas and things like that. It's just the way that works. But I like the fact that this seems to be sort of more made up of whole cloth. Again, hearkening back to European archetypes, but not not entirely dependent on them. So the Oeridians, throughout the history of the Flanaess, seem to be one of the driving forces. Right, they're the dynamic. They're the dynamic wandering peoples. They've got these big long migrations, which the other big migration people we're going to get to in a sec. But they seem to be the driver of history, in as much as they founded the Great Kingdom and its associated major states, and their dynamism helped the Great Kingdom conquer most of the Flanaess, and then then it kind of spent itself. And that kind of, once again, to my mind, brings up Rome, but it's a very tenuous analogy. So another instance of inspiration, not copying. And last but not least, we come to the Suel, or Suloise. And here we go once more on the map. It's those big black arrows that you see. They start in the Suel Imperium, and they go pretty much everywhere. They go up into the Filronian Peninsula. They go down into the Great Kingdom and the Scarlet Brotherhood, and even into Hetmanaland, which is an interesting thing, because the savages that we see down there are in fact Suloise, which is a really neat thing. And okay, so the Suloise, on the other hand, we are talking about the fleeing Suel folk were scattered in a broadcast fashion across the Flanaess, so that most tend to mix with other groups. The Suel race is very fair-skinned, some being almost albino. They have light red, yellow, blonde, or platinum blonde hair. Eye color varies from pale blue to violet or deep blue. Curly or kinky hair is common. The inhabitants of the Duchy of Ernst are nearly pure Suel. The frost, ice, and snow barbarians are perfect specimens of unmixed Suloise blood. The nearly albino snow barbarians are the best example. The Suel folk are quite predominant in the island groups off the eastern coast of the Flanaess, as well as on the Tilvanot Peninsula. That's where the Scarlet Brotherhood and all that stuff is. The bands migrated into the vast Amadeo jungle, and Hetmanaland are so altered as to no longer be typical of the race. They tend to be tan to brown with heavy freckling. And there we go. And then for the dress, we have Suloise folk have long used solid colors. Aristocratic houses have one or two more such colors in their dress, so party-colored garments are not uncommon. The dress was originally loose pantaloons topped by a baggy blouse. This form of dress has been changed to meet the needs of varying climates, and so on and so forth. So the Suloise are another interesting one to try to pin down in terms of real-world analogs, because the most obvious analog is modern Scandinavia, or I should say Dark Ages Scandinavia, which is sometimes called the mother of nations for a very good reason, because during the fall of the Western Roman Empire, the Germanic tribes just kind of burst forth, a lot of them claiming to come out of Scandinavia or the northern Baltic region, and then they just burst across Europe. They formed all kinds of countries that we still know today: Italy, Spain, France, England, the Anglo-Saxons. So we have that idea that these migrations of pale and blonde peoples created all these nations. On the other hand, the descriptions obviously don't match exactly, because most of the time peoples of Germanic descent usually have straight hair and straight blonde or brown hair, rather than crinkly hair. They don't tend to be albino in that sense. So once again, it's an imperfect thing. Plus, the idea is that the Suloise actually had this vast imperium, this huge empire that lasted for many centuries and was, generally considered to be thoroughly evil. And in my own writing, I've actually pushed the Suloise clock back a bit, and rather than making them analogous to the Scandinavians, I've made them more analogous to the Indo-Europeans, where they go. Not only do they go east into the Flanaess when the Imperium falls, but they also go south into Zahindia, and that kind of works into the Aryan migration theory of Indian prehistory. So there's a lot of ways you can play with this. But again, there's no real single the Suloise are this people on Earth. So again, we have this idea that we have something that's kind of sort of inspired by earthly events and peoples, but because it's in a fantasy world, it just gets completely manipulated and turned on its head. Rather than coming out of Scandinavia, they're going into the Scandinavian area. Which is the Thelronian Peninsula in the upper right, up there. And as I said at the beginning, there are some other races that are that we know about in the Flanaess. There's the Olmen folk, who are kind of Mesoamerican. There are the Tuve people, which are sort of sub-Saharan African. There are the Renahi barge folk and the Atloi, who are sort of like gypsies. There's a whole bunch of Romani. There's a whole bunch of analogies, and some of them are closer than others. But on the whole, especially when we're talking about the major races of the Flanaess, I think it's very difficult to make a one-to-one correlation between one of the major ones and a real-world earthly race. So anyway, hope you enjoyed this one. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you use the races at all? I mean, does it have an influence on your characters or on your campaign, the way you run it? If an NPC is a Suloise, would you play him differently than an Oeridian or something? Do let me know what you think in the comments. I go back and forth on this myself. It's something I aspire to do, but in the heat of actually running a game, I kind of lose track of it. So I just want to know if I'm the only one. So anyway, hopefully you like this one. Let me know what you thought in the comments, and I will talk to you later. Thanks for watching today's video. Please remember to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Below you'll find links to my Patreon, which helps make these videos possible. You'll also find the web store, where you can buy my books, and my blog, where you'll find all sorts of free downloads and other articles. Thanks, and have a great day.